はロサンゼルスのハリウッドど真ん中サンセットブルバードという通りに来ています。ここは音楽の聖地、とにかく世界的に超有名なスタジオが立ち並ぶ街なんですよね。ハリウッドといえば音楽のプロの方ならご存知だとは思いますが、マイケル・ジャクソンだったりマライア・キャリーだったりアリアナ・グランデだったりジャスティン・ビーバーだったり、とにかく超有名なアーティストやシンガーが数々のレコーディングを行ってきたキャピタルスタジオだったりサンセットサウンドスタジオ、イーストウェスト、ウェストレイクスタジオなど、犬も歩けば犬も歩けば音楽スタジオに当たるっていうぐらい音楽スタジオが密集している街なんですね。で、今日こちらのハリウッドのど真ん中に会社を構える音楽機材屋さんなんですけど、ここハリウッドのど真ん中で手作りされている機材なんですね。ロサンゼルスのエンジニアの人はかなり皆さん知ってますし、ロサンゼルス以外でも結構使っている方が多いんですよね。私も何個か商品持っているので、今日はもうぜひ日本の皆さんに紹介したいと思います。コスパがやばいんですよ。もうコストとパフォーマンスが全く見合ってないっていうぐらい超激安でめちゃくちゃいい音質のものを買うことができるんですよ。このモンハイム社の商品はまだ日本に一切輸入されていません。で、この今回の動画をもって日本にも輸入解禁ですので、動画を見た皆さん普通に、こちらモンハイム社から商品を注文することも可能です。あと動画の後半ではですね、私が持っている機材チャンネルストリップやマイクなど使い方超具体的に説明していきます。ということで今日はこちらのモンハイム社に実際にお邪魔して社長さん、制作者でもあるアンドリュー・モンハイムさんのお話をいろいろ伺っていきたいと思います。ラズチャンネルのサラです。今回はですね、こちらロサンゼルスで手作りされている超ローカルなモンハイム社というこちらの機材を製造している会社にちょっと注目していきたいと思うんですけど、私が愛用しているこちらのチャンネルストリップとこちらフェットマイク、それからじゃじゃん、ちょっといきなり見せちゃいますけど、これやばい重たい、これじゃじゃん、すごい1億円入ってないけど1億円入ってそうなアタッシュケースですけど、昨年発売されたばっかりの真空管マイクなんですよ。ついに購入してしまったので、こちらの3つの商品について紹介していきたいと思います。まず一番最初に紹介したいのがこちらです。フェットマイク、モンハイム社の初期のデザインっていうか、だからちょっとね、このモンハイムのロゴとかも手書きで、これもそうなんですけど結構ちょっとアンティーク感があるんですけど、簡単に言うとアルトの女性ボーカリスト用のマイクなんですよ。で、私アルトボーカルなんで、もうそれを聞いた時にもう買うって言って買ったんですけど、要はアルトの人って私みたいにちょっとこう中域がかなり太くてもわっとしてるんですよね。ボワンとこう太い感じの声なんで、他のマイクとかで録音した後に、結局パソコン内で EQ かけて中域をちょっと削ってスッキリさせるっていう作業を行わなきゃいけないんですよね。だけどこのマイクはもうその作業一環がもう全部中に内蔵されてるっていう状態なんで、このマイクで録音した状態で中域がかなりタイトでスッキリしてるので、いちいちその後編集する必要ないんですよ。そのぐらいかなりスッキリ撮れる。でもね、削って音が細くなるっていうことはないんですよ。このマイクはちゃんと存在感をすごい残したまま中域のもわっとしてるところを絶妙にタイトにスッキリさせてくれてるっていう感じなんですよね。でね、ちょっとこれね、もう値段いっちゃいますけど、冒頭からこれ私750ドルで買ったんですよ。ね、今ちょっと値段上がって800ドルぐらいなんで、日本円だと9万いかないぐらいだと思います。8万程度でこのマイク買うのはもう絶対おすすめっていうのは、もうとにかく何でも使えるんですよ。このマイクボーカルに限らずギターもそうだし、アンプもガンガン取れるし、でこれめちゃめちゃハイ SPL なんで145デシベルぐらいまで取れるんじゃなかったかな。だからもう全然ガンガンアンプに近づけてベースギター取ることも可能ですし、もうピアノを取るのもむちゃくちゃいい感じの音に取れます。このモンハイムの商品はですね、基本ハイファイモットーなんですよ。あんまりこう音の色味を変えないで、すんごいクリーンだけど存在感のある音質を作るっていうことをモットーにやってるんですよね。だから、このボーカルもこのチャンネルストリップもそうなんですけど、なんかヴィンテージ感があるんだけど、もう今時の音っていう感じの音質作りができる、もう多分そういうのをやりたいプロデューサーばっかだと思うんですよ、最近。私もそうだし。だから超今風の音 だけだとやっぱ味気がないし、やっぱりヴィンテージ感出したいから、結局はみんなヴィンテージのマイクとか EQ なりを買って録音したものを結局パソコン内でちょっと最近のエフェクトとかいろんなものをかけたり処理したりして今っぽい音にするみたいなのを皆さんやってると思うんですけど、それが全部1個でできちゃうってことなんですよ。で今回アンドリュー・モンハイムさんの製造しているスタジオに実際に行っていろいろインタビューをして分かったんですけど、彼はもともとブルーとマンリーでブルーマイクの働いていった人なんですよ。もう最初の初期の頃に何年も働いて、会社を大きくするのを大きく手助けした人なんですけど、独立して今自分の商品を作っているってことなので、要はブルーとかマンリー時代に学んだ、ヴィンテージマイクとはみたいな受け継いで、そこにさらにいわゆる今時の音を足したっていう商品開発の仕方をされた、ものなんですよね。だからまさに私が今言ってるようなことが腑に落ちるとは思うんですけど、ざっくりまとめるとモンハイム社はまず1、コスパがやばい。これ17万円ですよね。でこれ7万5千円でしょ。でチューブマイクちょっと後で紹介しますけど、これもやばい。もう値段って度肝を抜かれるぐらい、30万くらいのマイクの音がするんですけど、値段は後で言いますせっかくなんで貯めますよ。で2、音質なんですけどハイファイで自己主張が強すぎない、日本人の心に似てるんですよ。すごくさりげない存在感だけどちゃんとそこにいるっていう感じの存在感の音を作ることができる。色をつけすぎないっていう、だからすっごい処理しやすいんですよ。もうほぼミックスしなくていい音っていうのを目指して彼はやってるんですよね。でちょっと動画の後半でこちらのマイクと、あと新商品のチューブマイクと私のボーカルで、録音するところを皆さんに見せたいと思いますし、この EQ にまさにつないで実際に私が録音した音を WAV ファイルで、皆さんの視聴できるようにしますので、動画の後半までお付き合いください。まずはですね、ハリウッドのモンハイム社に実際にお邪魔していろんなことをインタビューしてきたので、そちらからご覧ください。お邪魔します。
Hello.
Hey,
How are you?
Andrew. It's been a while. How are you?
Good. Come on in.
Okay.
After you, just watch the tape machines on the floor.
Okay.
We have some stuff in for service.
Oh my goodness. Look at all these. Wow, すごい。
So we're making
めっ
tube.
ちゃ作ってる。Yes?
This is the all tube channel strip. So this is a microphone preamp and EQ and custom transformers. So these are all the circuit boards for the channel strip, the Mannheim channel strip.
How have you been?
Good. Busy, busy, busy. Working on microphones. And
What were you doing today?
today I was up at the new build for Christina Aguilera's guitar player. I'm building a studio for Fish, Michael Fish Herring.
Wow, look at this messy table.
Lots
Wow.
of testing and assembly right now.
What is this one?
So this is a custom U47. They had ordered a certain capsule type. They wanted to go with a newer version of the U47 and then a custom circuit. A guy who owns a rental
Oh, it's a guy?
facility, and he wanted a really affordable but really high-end U47 for his clients. The K47 capsule generation.
So cool. Okay, so let's dive in.
All right, welcome.
Have you subscribed to Raz channel yet?
Hell yeah, man. Who hasn't?
So the first product by Mannheim is the Omni microphone. I really wanted to make the first product be something that I could use every day in every session. I was looking for a solution to recreate how you would hear something just like your own ears in a room, in a space. And the Omni microphone was the first microphone that I wanted to design a reference microphone to start with.
Okay.
So I wanted to design something that wasn't a traditional linear reference microphone, but it was something that sounded like having your own ears in the space. I had a real issue with a lot of microphones that were linear traditionally that didn't sound like the space. They just sounded kind of like flat and dull. And I wanted like an enhanced stereo image, because we instinctively kind of bump 10 kilohertz
in the mix.
in a space, or overheads or acoustics. because we want to enhance the space or the air around it. But actually, when you're recording, what happens when you tune that into the capsule, you're actually enhancing the stereo depth of the image. So it's not just the air, the perceived air, you're actually getting more dimension or space around the source.
Like during the recording.
During the tracking, exactly, yeah. So the goal of this was to kind of take tracking to a next level for a reference microphone.
Yeah.
And non-traditional, non-linear reference that had more perceived air and sounded more like your own ears, but also that would extend into the natural low end and still be affordable. So once it was created as a reference, it became a go-to in a lot of other situations that I would have never thought of, right? So I started testing it on a piano, and
I saw a lot of engineers using this as a room mic, drum overhead.
It's used at East West for orchestral tracking because it sounds so defined and spacious in the space because of the bump and the frequency response. Yeah, it does great for room applications. I did a bunch of orchestral recordings myself with them, and they were way different from a traditional, say, Neumann M50 or something like that that's been a standard. They just gave way more breadth and space and definition. The M50 and other mics like that were standards for room tracking because they kind of are a little darker and more forgiving. But when you have a more enhanced depth of field and stereo image, it can be very appealing to the ear in other ways. So naturally, other people started using the Omni and the Omni SPL, which is the second version of the mic I made. They could withstand high SPL, like heavy drummers or guitar amps. I designed a second version because people were using them in very non-traditional ways.
Oh, I see.
Right, because everyone's working from home or a smaller studio or like modified home studio that's like medium size. And so they were starting to use them as like distant room mics in guitar amping or on a guitar amp or as drum overheads.
Yeah.
Other companies' mics, you can have like the advertised spec, but they might start distorting a lot earlier.
I see.
Or getting really aggressive or like kind of they have teeth, as we would say, like they get really aggressive in the mid-range. The SPL version of this, which is now the standard version, it can take a lot of SPL, 130, 135, with no problem. It sounds incredible, it's very natural, and you really have to do heavy work to get it to sound pushed. It's going to sound like what's in front of it. I tell engineers, especially young engineers that haven't used a lot of omnidirectional microphones, put them where you would put your own ears, right? Because the litmus test for something like this is like, if these are my ears in the room, where would I put my ears? I wouldn't put them right on the snare drum. I would put them spaced back so that I see the image or hear the image. So you want to put these where you would put your own ears. Another thing that I found with engineers experimenting on their own is they started using it with vocals and like individual string tracks.
Wow, and this is good for solo instrument and vocal too.
Well, you would couple it with another microphone. And then that's where it really starts to be a tool. If you think of like a conventional string arrangement, right? You would have close microphones to supplement the immediacy of the image, and then you would have distant microphones.
So I'm gonna have my main microphone, and then you're gonna place this where?
Yeah, this would be like slightly distanced. For a vocal, it might start at about 18 inches back from the lead microphone. So you would distance it behind the main microphone. When it's slight compression with this microphone, all of a sudden you're gonna start to hear the nuance of the voice and the space around the voice. And it can solve a lot of problems that people try and achieve with delay and subtle reverb. You have more of the voice in the space.
Without adding any reverb.
Without touching it. And then you can start to wet-dry relationship with this mic. And maybe this feeds the reverb channel or feeds a delay channel.
Wow, that's interesting.
And all of a sudden you have this enhanced depth that maybe it comes up in the chorus and we're trying to achieve a certain effect on the voice only in the chorus or in a big bridge section. There's more definition and depth on the voice because of a lot going on musically. So all of a sudden this microphone is now like a supplemental tool for your lead vocal. and because of how clean and accurate it is,
Yeah.
but also it's that air spacing around the voice.
It's adding the air automatically.
Yeah, without
you don't
having
have to do it in the mix.
And it's more natural sounding, right? Because it's more defined than it is air.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I always try to boost a lot around those like air area in the mix.
Right.
But sometimes it gets too harsh.
That's a great point, and a lot of people don't hear it the same. And different cultures, different styles, right? Different music styles treat high end very differently. Rock is different than pop and hip hop and rap, and the high end can be an amazing form factor that can change a pop mix, but maybe it doesn't feel right for a jazz track. So it has to be flexible. If you have a tool like the Omni, you can float it in and out of the project and let it kind of tease the details in and out of the image as you want, you know? Yes. So the Omni is really unique in its advantages because most mics that do what it does are 2, 3, 4 times the price. And while they have equivalent value in terms of like how you perceive things and the image, products like Sanken, DPA, oftentimes they either fall a little bit short if they're close to the price of the Omni, or in the case of some of the Sanken stuff, it's 3 or 4 times the price. And it's sounding as good, if not just a touch better. And all the products in the line that I designed, the first goal is it has to have a function. Like everything I make has to have a function. It has to be a good tool. It has to improve what's out there on the market. It has to make your tracking more mix ready. It has to make your signals more defined, more finished, more polished. There has to be a function with every tool. And then the second part of the goal of the company is to deliver something that's really competitive price-wise with the traditional style of that tool. Right now I'm working on a microphone that has some inspiration from a Neumann U67, traditional, not new. And because I've always loved the traditional Neumann U67, but it does things a little differently and it looks a lot different, and it's going to be a different sounding tool, but it pulls from those inspirations. It's going to be very competitive price-wise with something like that in the marketplace. The Omni was the same concept. When I first put out the Omni almost 5.5, 6 years ago, no one was touching Omnis except for a few companies. Now all of a sudden there's different companies doing a small diaphragm this and a small diaphragm that.
They're trying to copy you?
I mean, I went to a lot of people and showed them this tool, and everyone was really impressed. It doesn't always fit people's workflow, but when you start using it, you will find a place to use it because there's so many applications to kind of float it in and out and improve your workflow with. So competitive pricing wise, you can't really compare it to anything that's out there because no one's really doing the same approach.
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of microphones have a hype point, meaning that they have a point of focus in frequencies where they're pushed forward or they're accentuating. They're 3 to 5, 3 to 6K for like a traditional Earthworks. For a lot of people it was very aggressive, especially on certain styles of tracking. I think they might have improved some of their products, but that has changed because we're not using tape the same way. We're using digital formats, so some of those frequencies can be very aggressive and very unforgiving. But when you have natural extended low end and natural extended top end, it can be very satisfying to hear it kind of things gel together in a mix because it's just immediately giving breath around the image.
Yeah.
So the Omnis come as a matched pair. We test everything in-house, and a matched pair go for $750.
$750?
Yeah. US dollars.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god. And then it's like the same as like $2,000, $3,000 microphone?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good deal.
Yeah. And still handmade here.
That's beautiful. I heard some of the recording using Omni, and I heard a lot of low end compared to other small condenser microphone. That was the most surprising part.
Yeah.
Like I thought I could even record my vocal with this as a main microphone.
I've done some of that.
Really?
Yeah. And typically people will end up using it as an enhancement microphone.
Right, yeah.
But it has some really cool qualities.
Yeah.
Especially depending on the room and how the room sounds and reacts to the voice.
Yeah.
First one I'll play is just a stereo pair of Omnis on tabla percussion.
Yeah. No EQ, nothing.
No, just a little bit of reverb. but the mics are just directly feeding the reverb, no EQ. This one, they're about 3 feet off of the tablas. I'm going to play another one. This is from engineer-producer Dave Way. These are the Omni SPLs, and they're in the Glyn Johns form. So they're on drums, and they're in the Glyn Johns position overhead and side. And then there's a kick mic.
No snare mic.
No snare mic. So you can hear the kick happening, and a very natural low end around the kit, very full tone. There's a subtle delay that he's using, but outside of that, very honest and very clear.
Yeah. I felt it sounds silky, like on top.
Yeah.
It's very clear, but it's not harsh.
Exactly, and you want it kind of poking through your reverb channel and as you feed it, but you don't want it biting through anything or getting super aggressive.
But I don't know, for this drum, I felt it's kind of aggressive high, but like I said, it's not really piercing my ears or anything.
And he's actually, like, the drummer was actually laying into the cymbals, but it doesn't come across that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any, like, vocal project you could show me?
Sure. There's an artist named Rachel Oto.
Isn't she Japanese?
She's Japanese. Yeah.
Born and raised here?
Born in the U.S., yeah. Her family's from Japan. She is like kind of a Johnny Cash vibe or Ennio Morricone kind of musical film style. So this song is actually her playing in live with voice and one Omni on the guitar. So a FET microphone, a Mannheim FET, and one omnidirectional on her guitar. So not only is the acoustic tracked with the Omnis, all the strings are a FET and an Omni. That's it. And
is this live? Or it's just mixed with the live guitar and vocal?
Correct. She was like sitting on the couch here in the studio in real time with no click. She had rehearsed it a few times and got it really tight. I said, look, I just want to hear you do a take here, and I'm just going to set up an Omni and a FET and just... She knows those mics really well. So she was comfortable. She just did a 2 or 3 takes, and the third take was perfect. And we used that as the reference for everything. So everything got layered on top of that. So the vibraphone, the mellotron, the strings section, it's made to sound like 4 or 5 parts, but it's one woman positioning.
You recorded that string here?
Yeah.
With Omni?
In the front room, yeah. With an Omni and a FET. And we changed the woman's position in front of the microphones. So she moved, when she was doing one layer, she would move here, another layer here, another layer here. So that she sounded like the multiple instruments. Yeah. And the accuracy and clarity and space of the Omni was so fluid that we could just stack it and it sounded so clean and open.
Yeah.
So the string section sounds like a string section.
Can I hear that string section one more time? I love that string sound.
It's beautiful, right?
It is beautiful.
It's just
really
naturally spaced. So Dave Way actually mixed this for us, and he just did such a nice job. And actually, he tracked a lot of Fiona Apple's pianos on the last album, and he used the Omni SPL and the Mannheim channel strip for everything.
Okay, then now we gotta talk about the channel strip.
Segue.
So, can I have explanation for your best product, Mannheim Channel EQ? Oh, channel strip.
So this is the front panel of the Mannheim channel strip. It is a tube preamp and tube EQ. So in the tradition of a hi-fi unit, it has top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art parts and components. It also has custom input transformer and a custom-built output transformer. They are hand wired and they're designed specifically for this unit. Every gain stage can be isolated and powered on or powered off. There's a bypass switch at every gain stage. So you can come into this input as a mic or a line level and simply bypass the preamp. There's also a transformer gain. So the transformer is actually adding gain to the signal. So if we drive the signal through the transformer, we're actually experiencing almost like a subtle compression that's happening with the transformer. So the transformer is reacting with the signal and it's either amplify it or you can also attenuate it as well. But within that is essentially transformer saturation. You're getting a different characteristic with the response of the microphone. The transformer start to subtly compress things as you drive the gain.
Yes. But it's not compressing, right?
It's technically like a hi-fi circuit non-compression compression. It's like using a very hi-fi signal of the transformer without adding compression circuitry. It's subtle compression or transformer saturation of the signal without adding a whole dedicated circuit. So in the true spirit of hi-fi, the approach, we're not adding additional circuitry to get characteristics of compression. So it's very unique. It has a drive characteristic that can be very pleasing, and it can take a vocal that's very smooth and kind of just average response, and you can have a characteristic that sounds compressed and full and rich and done. So it does that, but then also for guitars, you can take a really heavy guitar and drive it in and kind of almost just like super compress it if you overdrive it to the transformer. Drum room, it does some really incredible things on ambient drum mics as well. It's a really unique feature. When I designed the channel strip, there was a couple people involved in this, a couple friends that are hi-fi gurus, and they've designed a lot of very high-end gear as well. And the discussion was that I wanted to keep a product that maintained a high level of clarity, definition, without incurring a lot of extra distortion. We also didn't want to introduce any phase change into the signal path. So it is truly, in the hi-fi sense, a hi-fi piece of gear, and using relays to pass the signal instead of additional circuitry or wiring. It's a true passive network that's being used every time you turn on a bypass switch or change a setting that needs a gain section. If you wanted to do a more pop vocal, we would go slightly to the right. The first one is kind of like a little bit more aggressive, more finished, more polished. And then the second setting is pretty much a dialed pop vocal on most condenser microphones. And essentially we're getting a 60 dB increments from the transformer. So between the two, the preamp and the transformer, you have almost 70 dB of gain. So it works well for ribbon microphones as well. Very clean. It is one of the quietest tube preamps on the market. And you'll see down here to the left is a DI. It is a tube DI. So you're going direct into a 6922 tube, which is classified by most as a very clean hi-fi tube or medium mu. The 6922 is a fantastic choice for this specific preamp, where there's two tubes for the entire preamp. So the first portion of the first triode is used as a preamp circuit. The second triode across the first section of the EQ. Third triode of the second tube is used for the other EQ, and the last triode, the second tube, is used for the buffer circuit. So with two tubes, we have a hi-fi circuit that's functioning at a very high level without a lot of ambient heat. So the ambient temperature of this box stays very manageable, very cool.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah?
It doesn't make it hot at all. Like it's normal warm, but some of the equipment... heater
and some of the other high voltage preamps, residual heat is very high, and you have to use a spacer on the rack. I specifically designed this to be as efficient as possible while still giving you a ton of drive characteristics.
Why those other boxes are really high? Like, do they use extra tubes?
Yeah, there's additional tubes beyond two tubes used in here. That's specific to this box. So it keeps costs down for you power-wise, but also it keeps costs down for you service-wise. So when you go to get new tubes for your preamp, you know, at other companies where I've worked, I've serviced preamps, and customers spend up to $200 for new tube just to get the preamp working. In this case, you're swapping out two $25, $35 tubes and $70, $75 for an entire retube.
How often do I need a retube?
About 3 to 5 years is the best, especially if it's on a lot. If it's not on a lot, when you use it maybe a couple times a week, you could easily get 5 years out of it without a problem. This is also a great way to test our tubes. If a tube goes bad over time, you can isolate the gain and see where the tube noise is coming from. Is it coming from the tube? Maybe there's a noise from the microphone that we're using, or a signal from the patch bay or something like that. You can drive it and distort it. It handles very well, and the harmonic response is really nice. Low cut, it's a really great low cut. It is tailored with a hybrid roll-off between 9 and 12 dB per octave, and it sounds so smooth all the way up to 200 hertz. In the true, reputation of pop vocals or guitars where you're needing things rolled off but without distorting or aliasing on the top end, this really is a very unique high-pass filter. I spent an extra like 6 months getting it right, so.
Other EQs, like as you cut the low aggressively, it adds the top, right?
That's the best, it's the best way to put it. Aggressive high mids, aggressive top end, as you roll off the low end. In this case, we're still using the tube in the roll-off circuit. Then we have on the second section, or EQ1, almost like a mid-Pultec style EQ. Essentially, you're able to affect the most important frequencies of the mid-range, which is where all the definition is, either for your guitar or for your vocal or drums or your bass, especially for bass and guitar DI. The mid-range can be a huge game changer, and we get a lot of mid-Pultec fans that like to use the mid-Pultec on guitars especially. We have a shelf, a bell, and a shelf. This low frequency is a very subtle, you can crank it all the way up to 14 dB and feel the frequencies changing without having crazy buildup in your low end. The bell is a mid emphasis, low mids and mids, so it is between 180 and 2K, so the critical frequencies where we're defining a source, so we're changing or cleaning up a vocal or adding a little bit of a bite or definition to a guitar. On the shelf, we have a very subtle shelf that is acting much like the low shelf, where it's imparting high mid frequencies with additional gain without overdriving or distorting anything. Then the EQ2, which is our third section. The EQ2 is essentially an airband or an elevated shelf.
That's my best favorite feature.
Yeah.
That's the part it really separates your product to any other product, I think.
The cool thing about this band is that you can switch between mid frequencies in X1, which is all the values that are on here. It's an additional mid frequency band. Or you can go into X10, which is shelf of airband. So it's taking all these values, multiplying them by 10. So your 200 becomes your 2K. Your 400 becomes your 4K, all the way up to 20K, 22K actually. And all of a sudden you have a boost of air in a tube gain circuit that is essentially a Pultec style airband, and it sounds fantastic. It's so natural sounding. It doesn't get weird or aggressive in any way. You can crank it and 6 dB and you're still feeling okay. Subtle, but has a huge impact on the signal. In the output section, some unique things, but also some traditional things. So we have the phase inversion. So we have 0 or 180 degrees out of phase. This circuit, by the way, is in true hi-fi fashion where there is no phase shift incurred across the EQ or the preamp. In a lot of in-the-box processing, you'll actually find that you're affecting the phase when you send a signal through the EQ or through this processing. So this is kind of in the traditional hi-fi sense of not having any phase relationship change through the box. If you wanted to change the phase in relation to something else, the 180 degree is there. We also have next to that an output transformer. So we have an input transformer and a dedicated output transformer. Some people will use a pair of these on the mix bus and bypass the input gain and only process through the output transformer. I've also had people that in the 1-to-1 setting, they'll switch it into 2-to-1, and what that does is simply tightens the package. It basically, for aggressive guitars or maybe a mix that came through that has a lot of extra high aggression or high mid aggression, this kind of just subtly tapers off the top and bottom. It kind of fuses things together much like a very subtle variable mu or variable gain compression would do. It just does a really subtle compaction of the image or of the signal. For aggressive guitars, it can be very pleasing and satisfying, especially vocals that may have been tracked at another studio and you're bringing them in through your outboard gear and you're kind of tightening things up. It's a very effective tool that just switch on the 2-to-1 transformer. And after that, we have a true output attenuator, much in the tradition of a fader. It is a stepped output attenuator that I actually like to use as a fader. I'll ride it during a vocal session. Once I get all my gain characteristics right and my tonalities, I might just ride this output attenuator for the vocalist. I have some customers, much like they would use a pair of Pultec EQs. I have customers that use a pair of these on their mix bus or on their stereo instrument like a piano. They will tame and handle transients in a different way than you would normally get through a plug-in or something like that. You know, the old Pultec trick of heavy boost and cut of the same frequency.
That's what I wanted to
Can be done here as well. In this case, we're doing it here. I just chose 3.8K.
Yeah.
And I did that on both EQ1 high band and then EQ2 band. And then I cut it here on the EQ1 band, and then I raised it here, the equivalent amount on the EQ2 band. And I do that a lot for bass. And the bass, all of a sudden a really great bell curve develops in the bass signal, and the bass tonality comes alive, and it's really unique. For vocal, piano, acoustic guitar, almost always I'm boosting the air band just to add a modern feel to it, keep things having air around them. That's kind of my go-to, my default. In bass and direct signals like guitar and bass, where I'm using the DI, or some keyboards as well, I will do that boost and cut trick that we talked about, and I'll keep it mid-frequency focused and not so much on the air band. Female vocal, I'm usually rolling up to about 60 to 80 hertz on the low cut. On the EQ1, I'll typically go a subtle boost at 80, and then like alto vocals, I'll typically take 1K down just a hair, and then I'll boost 3K8 a little bit. And if it's a really present microphone, I won't do that. If I'm using someone else's microphone, then I don't want extra presence. I'm not gonna do that, but that's typically where I'll go. And if the vocal's really aggressive and say it's a soprano and we need a lot more body but a lot less character, I might take it down 1K there, and then I might take it around 2K5 there, or 3K8. I might take that down a touch, and then I boost the air band just to give them some space around the voice. I'm usually between 12K and 16K depending on the voice, and I'll listen to it in real time and adjust it. As you can see, it's very simple. Dedicated XLR input, dedicated XLR output, with the option to go out TRS, then a ground lift for the signal. Very standard, nice and simple patch point on your patch bay.
じゃじゃん、買ってしまったチューブマイク。これだからモンハイム社の真空管マイク初なんですよ。真空管欲しかったんですよね。欲しいんだけど高いじゃないですか。これ買ったばっかなんですよ。まだ開けてなくて、この撮影のために取っといたんで、前から開けちゃいたいと思います。この超頑丈なアタッシュケース。わーおー、こんな感じ。すごーい。超ご丁寧に見てくださいよ。This is a tube microphone and use 12AT7 tube type. チューブのタイプまでついてますし、3から5年で変えてくださいと。素敵だよね。これちゃんとありがとうございます。OK、ちょっと読んでないで早速見ましょう。はい、ということで中に何が入っているか。まずは、ちゃんとパワーケーブルでしょ。あとこれですね、マイクのケーブル。こんな長いの？こんな長かったらだいぶ助かるよ。こういうのって結構短かったりするんで、届かないと困るんですよね。っていうのはこういう替えが効かないじゃないですか。いいね。で、こちらがパワーサプライになります。じゃじゃん。いいね、これ。よいしょ。結構がっちりやんなきゃいけない感じだけど、このポーラーパターン、指向性をこんなに変えられるのはめちゃくちゃ便利。ボーカルにもできるし、ヘアを取ることもできますし、ツインボーカルももちろん取れますし、素敵。てか名前言い忘れてるんだけど、クレームっていう商品なんですよ。てか色がいいですよね。この真っ白じゃないんだけど、オフホワイトみたいな質がある。っていうか早速、待ってましたのマイク開けちゃいます。じゃじゃーん。光り輝いている。超可愛い、普通に。てか色めっちゃいい。高い白みたいな。車と一緒だけど。素敵。ちょっと出してみましょう。わーお。いいね。 これマジ早く使いたい。要はこれあれなんですよね。C12 のモデルにして作られた真空管マイクなんで、このサイズとか重さもちょうどいいですよ。高そうって感じ。重たいし。ロゴも私が買ったこのフェットの超初期段階のモデルからさらに進化してる。ほら。金具でロゴがついてる。いいですね。で、じゃじゃん。装飾マント、紐がほどけると超めんどくさいやつだけど。でもちゃんとエクストラの紐もついてきてくれてる。いいね。超助かる。いや、こんななんかちゃんといい真空管マイク買ったの初めてかもしんない、私。てか持ってるんだけど、ちょっとね、安めのやつで、いいんですよ。すんごいいいから、ちょっとそのマイクも、後日紹介したいと思ってるんですけど、いや、これは絶対値段的にもやっぱ高い音すんだろうな。私が持ってる今の真空管よりも。早速撮ろう。ボディもむちゃくちゃいいですね。なんかこの、わかります？なんかね、これ、光の当たり具合で、虹色に見えるって言ったらあれだけど、質感が出るんですよ。これはかなりいいですよ。見栄えもいいし。あとは音です。音。聞いていきましょう。トゥトゥ、ララ、ララ、ハオ、ハオ。なんかすごい。上めっちゃクリスピー。はーはーい。ややややや。すごい。このエアー感が。なんだろうこれ。はい。まずは、モンハイムの一応チャンネルストリップに繋いでるんですけど、マイクプリとして。全部切ってます。EQ とか、ローカットとか。ララララララはーはーはー。ラララララや。不思議。これ超音色ありますよ。超キャラクターがある。めちゃめちゃ存在感ありますね。モンハイムのチャンネルストリップと違って、こいつはめっちゃ自己主張強いかも。だからちょっと意外です。びっくり。さりげなくない。でも逆にこのぐらい色があっていいんだと思う。まあいろんなマイクのチョイスありますからね。どうだろう、高いの歌うよりは下に下がっていった方がめちゃめちゃ味が出てくる声になりますね。こうガツッとボディがある上にカリッとしたトップが乗ってるっていう感じ。さすがそうですよね。フェットの時も同じだけど、こうやっぱミドルのとこがキュッてなって、要はなんか音が8の字みたいになってるんですよ。カリッとしたとことボディって感じで、この中間がギュッとかなりタイトになってます。だから要は中域のもわっとするとこですよね。本当それがすごいモンハイム強いなと思います。やっぱり私みたいにアルトで中域がもわっとするボーカルにはもうもってこいだと思いますよ。フェットの時と比べると多分超万能ではないと思います。このマイクは逆にすごく性質がはっきりしてるので、ここぞっていう使う曲があるんだと思う。てか逆にこのマイクに合わせて曲を作ってもいいかもしれない。周りにこんな曲作りたいなとかインスピレーションが湧いてくるぐらい、このマイクの自己主張やばいです。めっちゃ好き。このぐらい私よっていう感じのなんか女王様みたいな音質がありますね。やっぱ高いマイクってこうなんだね。安いマイクやっぱり女王様にはなれないですよね、どう考えても。高いって言ってもほら、このぐらい自己主張があるマイクを買おうと思うと、私も、持ってはないんですけど、過去にスタジオで使ったりとか、ナムとか行ったり、楽器屋さん行って試したりとかして、やっぱね、50万ぐらいするよ。20万以下では多分ないと思う。中古でも難しいんじゃないかな。値段を発表するの完全に忘れてたんですけど、安いと言いまくってた割には。このクレームは、なんと、$1,500です。$1,500。だから16万とか、その程度ですよね。すごくないですか？これはマジで安い。そんなに家計に痛手の出ることなく買えたマイクって感じです。例えばだけど、私オーディオテクニカの16万とかそんぐらいするマイク好きなんですけど、16万の音だもん。16万の音だなって感じ。だし、例えば他に持ってるマイクだったら AKG の C414 持ってるんだけど、それも10万ぐらいなんですよね。12万とか。で、12万の音なんですよ。やっぱ、12万だな、みたいな。このモンハイムは15万だけど、15万の音じゃないんですよ。だからそこが買いポイントっていうか驚きポイント。マンリーの50万ぐらいしたマイクかな。こういう音質がしたの。昔私が試した私の狭い経験の中からで言うと。ララララ。 ラララララ。ソフト系のボイスめっちゃいいと思う。ウィスパー系の女の子の声、優しいほわんとした声の女の子いるじゃないですか。そういうのとかもすごい生きてくると思いますよ。私の声ちょっと男性的なんで、男性取ったら、だからまさにこうですよね。ボディがギュッとガッとして力強いんですけど、カリッと感。だからこれがもうクレームのキャラクターだと思います。ニットの、だからさっき言ったもわっとしてるとここんなタイトルにしてくれてるんで、ギターなりピアノってまさにその領域じゃないですか。だからその領域にこう楽器をこう絡めてあげる、すごい生きたミックスになると思う。だからまさにこのマイク本当にミックスいらずっていうか、アンドリュー・モンハイムさんもずっと言ってましたけど、ミックスレディですよね。だからもう EQ とか何もしなくていいよって。っていうか EQ とかマジ何も通してない状態なんで、ただ繋いだだけでもマジでもうミックスされてる音です。だからそういう意味ですごいキャラクターがついてるのかもしれない。ラララララララ。こう下がった時がめっちゃ好き。いいね。こうやって音が下がっていってんのに、広域のクリスピー感がちゃんとこうついてきてくれるんですよ。すごくないですかそれって。ヘッドホン変えてみたいと思います。っていうのは、このヘッドホンね、ちょっと広域が印象的に足されてるやつなんで、ちょっとオープンバックしか今ないんですけど、だいぶ違いますね。まあでも、やっぱキャラクターは同じですね。ラララララダダダラララななななララララ I never needed you back I never needed you back 小さなボリュームで歌ってるのと大きなボリュームで歌ったのと性質が変わんない。だから大きく歌った時にギャーンってなるマイクもあるんですよ。これは大きく歌ってもボディのパンチ感とだけどシルキー感が全然変わりませんね。今録音したものをちょっと聞き直してみたいと思います。またそれも結構性質が分かってくるんで。なるほど。実際に今録音したやつ聞き直してみると、よりタイト感がありますね。音がこうギュッと詰まってる感じっていうのかな。ちょっとこっちのヘッドホンでも聞いてみましょう。マジでこれ EQ いらないと思う。さっき言いましたけど、このマイクでアコースティックで撮っちゃって、それの周りに楽器を固める方がすごいいい楽曲作りができるかもしれない。だからもうこの音を主役で周りを固めていくっていうプロダクションしたらすごい面白いかもしれない。いや、このエアー感はすごいですね。てか全体シルキーでボディの存在感があって、エアーがもうふわっとひやーっと広い部屋っていうかこう質感がやばい。よかったこれ買って。お金のない私が持っているマイクの中で一番いいマイクでした。まあ値段も一番高いんですけど今までの中では。前持ってたよく使ってるマイク、チューブマイクは7万5千円、8万ぐらいで買ったんですよ昔。それをずっと使ってきたんだけど、まあ値段もこれはそりゃ2倍ぐらいするんで、王者ですね。私ね、ボックのマイクが欲しかったんですよ。でもそれ50、60万するんですよね。で、実はアンドリューに頼んでたんですよ。ボックのレプリカ作ってくんないかみたいな。ね、全然作るよみたいな感じで。で、実際に値段も多分17、8万ぐらいで作れると思うよみたいな感じで言われてたんで、頼んでたんですけど、買わなくてよかったかも。どうだろう。ちょっとボックがここにないんで、聞き比べることができないんですが、私の記憶によると、他の会社のマイクを出すのもあれなんですけど、私が一番欲しかったボックと比べると、こっちの方が今っぽい音にはなってます。ヴィンテージ感は、向こうの方があるんですけど、そういう意味ではね。でもこれはこれでだから、ポップスとか、アコースティックとかにいいと思います。ほんとこれが、モンハイムのモットーだと思う。ヴィンテージ感3割、4割の、ポップス感6割みたいな。私みたいにポップスとか、ヒップホップとか作るプロデューサーにはすごい使いやすいと思います。さらに、アコースティック系もめちゃくちゃいいんで、それこそバイオリンとか、撮ってみるとすごい面白いものになるんじゃないかなと思います。で、今度はチャンネルストリップのローカットと EQ1、2を入れてます。ローカットは70Hz ぐらい下をカットしてて、EQ はですね、300Hz ぐらいを少し気持ち足してるのと、3K8 を若干ブーストしてます。3、4ぐらいかな。あと、エア EQ 足してます。12ぐらいを気持ち足してます。っていうのは、このマイクもかなりクリスピーなんで、そんなに上足さなくてもいいと思うんですけど、ちょっと聞いてみたいと思います。録音もしてきます。なるほどって感じ。すごいですね、これは。劇的に違う。はぁはぁ。もっと歌いやすくなりました。もっとポップスになってる。Kiss me if you want me stay. I can't let it go. EQ やっぱかければもちろんキャラかなり変わってきます。でもさっき言ったフレームの性質は元にありつつ、さっきの8の字のシェイプをちょっとこう変えるっていうような感覚だと思いますね。せっかくなんで、フェットもつないでちょっと聴き比べ皆さんにしてもらおうかなと思います。You went far away without telling me。このフェットを使うとギター取りたくなる。やっぱりこのマイクの方がかなり万能ですね。本当に何でもどんな楽器にでも使えるし、もうオンダゴーって感じだと思う。どんなレコーディングにもパッと持っていけるっていう感じのマイクですね。でもね、やっぱりクレームちゃんの方が愛情がもう出てきちゃったっていうぐらいキャラが濃いんで、まあどっちも持っててよかったなと思います。そうですね、やっぱスタイルを変えてって感じですかね。こっちのマイクは多分合う子にはバチッと合うと思うんですけど、てかどのマイクも同じだと思うんですけど、こういうキャラが濃いマイクって合う人と合わない人やっぱがっつり分かれちゃうんですよね。合う人にはもうめちゃめちゃいいんだけど、合わない人はってなるから、やっぱそういう意味ではフェットマイクは本当人選ばないっていう感じだと思います。ちなみに EQ オンにしたやつもちょっと録音しておきます。てかそうろくな歌歌えなくてごめんなさいね。I have tried in vain, never more to call your name. La 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 la。いいね。やっぱりこれもずっと聴いてるとむっちゃいい。ミックスしたくなる。だから色がそんなにないんで、自分の好きなようにかなり音を変えることができます。そのまま取っちゃってもいいし、ちょっとEQいじるぐらいでもいいだろうし、がっつり音を変えるっていうこともできる音質だと思います。クレームは違います。多分これはめっちゃミックスとかで音をいじっちゃうとちょっと違うかなっていう音になってくると思うんで、これはもう本当にこの子の音をこのまま使ってあげるっていうのがいいと思います。ちょっとマイク2人に囲まれてフワーンってしてるかなりいいお買い物だったと思います。ちょっと長い動画見ていただいて本当ありがとうございました。ですね、ちょっとまだあるんですよ。最後ね、アンドリューのスタジオ行った時にアンドリュー自体の人生にフォーカスを当ててちょっとインタビューしてきたんですよ。こんな厳しいロサンゼルスで長い間生き残っていくためには、どういう心得で自分の仕事を頑張っているかとか、どういう道筋で今この場に立っているかとか、いろんなことを聞いてきたので、ちょっと最後インタビューご覧ください。
So I actually started my sound career off Broadway doing sound design and theater production, and I transitioned into an audio engineering school just to go back and learn an enhanced skill set so I could be a little bit more at the top of my game. From there I went to the West Coast instead of the East Coast. I went and interned and worked with a number of production spaces in LA, and then I went on to become more interested in the technical side of things.
Yeah.
With like gear manufacturing. Then I transitioned into a job at Blue.
Why were you interested in
I was always fascinated with engineers that didn't know what they were doing and why it worked. And it always drove me crazy that if you were going to do a craft, that you wouldn't want to know all the details behind it. And I always wanted to be more knowledgeable about the process, understanding how the gear works, how things are designed, why things work the way they do, was essential for me to understanding greater production world and engineering. So I interviewed at Blue, and I was hired by Blue, and within like 6 months, I would say, I was running a department. And then within a year, I was head of production and services with another partner, a friend of mine, and we were pretty much running the international services and production. It accelerated fast, and I learned.
Production means like you were building
the microphones in-house in Westlake Village, California. So I learned a lot, and the company doubled in size within a year. So
Blue was not that big that time?
At that time, yeah, it was undergoing a lot of growth, and we didn't take on new employees, so it was the whole same staff, just double the size. So it was a lot of work, but the details and everything I learned from that kind of elevated me to a new platform where I knew how a factory functioned. And then I left Blue and went to Manly, and I was running the Manly factory for a number of years. And Manly was completely different from Blue. Blue was more corporate and more structured and more organized. Manly was like a factory that was run but had a lot of like organization issues and didn't have a strong structure with everything. There were a lot of tools and things in place, but there wasn't a lot of like good repeated formulas to execute. So I overhauled their QC process, their quality control process, and improved a lot of their build process. That ushered in a lot of changes within the company, and then I helped bring in some sales teams to help them grow. And then I left there and went and started my own company. And Mannheim Microphones is kind of a synthesis of kind of all that I've seen over the 10 plus years in that time, and kind of absorbed a lot, applied that to my own brand, and improved on pricing to quality ratio and delivering things that are unique to the product, to the line, to the recording culture as a whole, that don't just, you know, recreate or copy something else.
Right, there's no point in doing it.
And everyone's doing it, you know, it's like, but at least it's giving something fresh and alternative. A lot of the pitfalls of the larger companies is that they're not as in touch with the everyday user. So I get a lot of feedback from people that are recording and tracking every day, and they're talking to me direct and giving me feedback on stuff, even my own products, and telling me this works, that works, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And I get immediate feedback.
Yeah.
There's no sales team in between me and the end user. I remember at one of the companies, we were developing a product that was just didn't make sense to bring it out to market. And we had already dumped so much money into it that we were just trying to finish it.
Why does that happen? Because any company, they're trying to make the product that the user wants.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this was a great idea on paper, but the reality was that it would cost like $2,000, $2,500 for this box that like auditioned microphones, and it was like, who's gonna pay just to audition microphones in a matrix that much? There's so many other valuable tools that a modern workflow could benefit from instead of that. Like just where to put the emphasis and why I'm creating a product. And I intentionally started with not a vocal microphone because I wanted people to understand that I'm not just coming from an angle of here's the next microphone that I'm copying the history of production. I started with an Omni microphone for a reason. So it tells you that I'm listening to things a little differently.
Yeah.
And the whole climate of our company is really that way, you know, like our ears to the ground. And after that, the Omni was put out, a lot of people copied that idea of having a reference microphone be the forefront of a new push in their product, or everyone having a new small diaphragm microphone, because there was a need for it. And I was reacting to the need in my own studio of not having a very good omnidirectional reference microphone. Like I was missing one in my own arsenal. And I would ask people, I was like, do you have anything like this? No. Well, and I don't know if I would use it every day. Well, why wouldn't you? Oh, what? I don't know where else I would use it. Well, try it. Oh, you know what? I ended up using it underneath a drum to capture enhanced low end and depth. I was like, oh, that's crazy. I would have never thought. And all of a sudden, the feedback started coming in. And I was like, I use it here, I use it there. And, you know, I'm very fortunate to have incredible customers that talk to me openly about what they see, or, you know, even if they don't like the finish on a microphone, or like, I need to know that, you know?
So did you redevelop Omni a few times, or?
It got, there were three revisions early on, very fast, because I put it out and it was received well. I did one-on-one demos with all my clients first. There was no sales team. And I was literally just driving around the country or flying around the country, going to people's studios and trying them out and getting their feedback. So the first revision was the Omni SPL. That was coming from a reason of they needed a slightly lower noise floor for stacking arrangements, and also they need more headroom when heavy transient material is coming in. And that was very helpful to me. It made total sense. So I was like, okay, well, let's dedicate the next effort into making a high SPL version of this Omni microphone. Because obviously we hit it on the head with the Omni, but let's go Omni SPL. And then the Omni SPL was the first 20 pairs that I put in people's hands were sold. I did 20 demos, and every person that demoed them bought them. So that was very clear, and then I had to go and make more because I wasn't expecting that. And people weren't, and still aren't really telling people that they're using this tool, because it's become like their go-to for a very, like, it's like their hired gun, you know? They don't need to brag about their secret tool that does this thing that they put in that challenge. Then I need people to talk about it, right?
Exactly.
So it can grow. But
Yeah.
it was very exciting when people would text message me or email me and say, I'm using it on this project, you have to hear this sample. And I would listen to them like, that sounds incredible. And then all of a sudden the users are using it way more effectively than I ever imagined.
Yeah.
And it was very inspiring. So Janae Aiko is she owns customized set of microphones that I created for her, just specifically to her sound. It's a matched pair of FETs and a matched pair of Omnis. And she has a pair for touring and she has a pair for home studio. The composer Ron Avant from the Free Nationals is an incredible piano player. He's been using them. East West Studios uses the Omnis for tracking of orchestral work and stuff like that. Also, Fiona Apple's pianos were tracked with the high SPL Omnis and the channel strips. CBS owns the FET, and for James Corden, Late Show with James Corden, one of their house band members also owns the Creme for vocal recordings.
I told you I have Avalon, right?
Right, yeah.
Like that was my first purchase.
Right.
I'm not rich engineer, but I invested, but that was like a waste of money.
I get a lot of that. The Avalon 737, and Avalon has historically made some incredible gear, but the 737 kind of became a hit popularity because of its distortion characteristics, and it became very popular in the rap and R&B world.
But isn't that like a long time ago?
That's a long time ago, and a lot of great tools have come out since then. So I'll do shootouts with major pop and R&B and rap artists, and they'll hear the difference. And we'll do a shootout with a 737, and we'll do a Mannheim channel strip, and they're blown away.
Yeah.
Because the flexibility in your tone characteristics are just not. You can jump genres within a couple turns of a knob and be like folk, a couple tweaks on the knob, on the EQ, and you're into pop. And all of a sudden you're just shaping the tonality of the voice.
Yeah, and it's so easy to figure it out, how to tweak, and it's very simple.
The whole joke with the channel strip is turn until you smile.
Exactly, right. So we went to the same school, right? Crass in Arizona. What was the fun part, and what was the part you think this is not enough for me? Like I need more.
So I was what we call studio rat, meaning I was always in the studio after hours.
Me too.
You too, yeah. Because that's where you learn the most. You come back after classes are over. You either stay there and absorb everything, or you go home and just become a part-time engineer.
Yeah.
And I was like in late night sessions till 4 or 5 in the morning every night. And one of the teachers at the time, Alan, he was building a microphone. And I was there tracking a friend of mine, and I walked into the room and I saw him building a microphone. I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm building this microphone. And he was changing a capsule on a CK12, like a CK12 capsule on a C12 clone. I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, what is this? And like, he started explaining it. He piqued my curiosity. And I was like, if you can just hang out in a room and build the tools that I'm using in the other room, just kind of blew my mind that was a possibility. It's like I was working in studios and interning and assisting. There was a whole nother world that I knew existed, and I wanted to learn more about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what was going on the other side of things. What's behind the curtain, you know?
Yeah.
When I was at Blue, there was a couple chances I had to talk with the original designers of all of the gear. After my first year there, I got a lot more hands-on time with designers of the gear. And that was really important for my understanding and my kind of drive in the industry, because I was given a lot of really important nuggets or gems of information that started opening up the doors in my mind. You know, a microphone capsule is such a small surface area, but within that capsule, there's a whole relationship happening. There's a drill pattern, there's spacing, there's a material type, there's a surface across that material type, there's spacing between the materials. There's 50 relationships within a tiny little capsule that can drastically change the sound. As I started to learn about that, it started to kind of like trigger a lot of things that I got really interested in. And the manipulation of sound seemed to be at the heart of it, you know.
I think so.
I was starting to do custom tunings for customers, that I would custom tune microphone capsules for customers that were doing major projects. Like the one artist had a project he was doing with Tom Cruise for a major film, and he was teaching him how to play guitar, and they were doing some recordings for the film. And the guy came to me and said, hey, I'm doing this project and I need this microphone, but it's not in our budget and I can't get a hold of one. And we have to do trackings at a house. Can you make me a capsule that sounds like that microphone? So I did a custom tuned capsule that essentially mimicked that microphone on his existing bottle microphone. And all of a sudden he had this, at the time, $16,000 microphone for like $4,000. And he was really pleased with it and kind of blown away at what he had. It just gave me kind of a new set of value of what could happen in that relationship. And vintage gear would come in and I would service vintage gear, and I'd start to hear the relationships to modern gear and the pitfalls of certain modern gear or the pitfalls of vintage gear and how that could be improved. And you start to see all these small relationships, and they all make a huge difference. Reputation.
It's like a brand, like a fashion brand.
It's more believable now because everyone's cloned here and showed the world that
what's happening inside.
And there's also varying successes. Like some clones don't sound right. Or cloning a piece of gear while it's an homage to that piece of gear, you might just have botched the design because you don't know what you're doing. Or you could go a completely different design route, completely different internal circuit, but it sounds very similar. You're changing the perception by changing the response, but you're matching the response of the original tool. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. And I think it's gotten easier for people to understand over time. The real thing is reputation. You know, people will pay for something that sounds finished and good and amazing if someone else told them that.
So it's nothing about the parts? Like, let's say they're using really rare parts in it.
There's some to that, but like I can tell you, they're not going to equate to anything near that price tag. That price tag exists to keep people separated from the product.
I see.
It's a pricing tier system. And when you're in the audio manufacturing world, you see it everywhere. I have a product right now that I'm developing that sounds a lot like a U67, but it behaves a little differently. It's gonna be a $3,000 microphone, right? And I'm charging $3,000 because the parts, the metalworking is very expensive. But I'm also, if I charge too little, people will think less of it. If I charge too much, it's out of reach for a customer to buy. So there's a very important balance there. You have to respect the market. And there's some companies that have tried to disrupt this market and like charge a lot less for something. The dynamic has changed because the market has demanded, individuals have demanded that we change the prices because people can't afford that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And some people can, and that's great. But ultimately, I find that people with a lot of money that can afford things will also buy something that's not super expensive if they know the quality is right. I have a number of well-known pop artists that have bought the Creme. They have a $15,000 microphone that sounds very similar, but the fact that they can take that microphone with them to any major studio for $1,500. Their budget and their stress level is a lot lower then because I can carry this $1,500 microphone and I'm not freaked out that I'm carrying a $15,000 tool, right? But have a $1,500 tool that sounds incredible and take it into the studio.
I have your microphone already set on the stand and it's there.
Right.
But it's not a bad meaning. But if it's like
you don't feel bad about it.
5,000
I know.
microphone, I want to put it back in the case and I don't want it dusty.
Something like the FET, I jokingly call the FET a workhorse. Every studio needs a workhorse. Like I firmly believe that every studio needs a FET because it does everything good. It's not the perfect tool for everything, but when you need it, it is there and it's super reliable.
Yeah.
Just like a U87 vintage was for like decades. It was like 70s and 80s. You threw up a U87, you had a solution. So a good tool like that is invaluable. So I'm based in Hollywood. The company's been here for about 5 years. So people are more likely to trust the brand and come see the space and try things for the first time. So I've been very fortunate to get a lot of bigger names that come through because of where we're located. All my business has been word of mouth. I've never done an ad or anything like that. And that's a blessing and a curse because if I mess up, the brand messes up. And if I do well, the brand does well. I put a lot of trust in the people I work for and they put a lot of trust in me. Eventually it's growing slowly, but I'd rather take my time and grow it the right way than just blow up and start losing respect in the industry for the products not being what they should. I used to hear a lot from salespeople at the other companies I worked for is just promising the world for this one tool. And it doesn't cut it for a lot of the stuff. So
I feel like your business is much more one-on-one,
Yeah.
the customer and you. And I think that that's a great thing because most of the big companies, sometimes I feel like they're making just I don't know how to say, like a generic thing that will be applied to
yeah.
a majority.
And you know, like any customer can call me and say, hey, can you change the capsule out on this microphone? Can we do this? And I'm down. Because if it means trying or exploring something with them, it might lead to a new product, who knows? The Japanese market really excites me because I know there's a lot of detail-oriented musicians and engineers and producers in that market that care a great deal about the work they're doing. And I dealt with them in the other companies I worked for, and there was a lot of care and meticulous detail, more so than a lot of other cultures musically. There's very careful thought and method that took place in a lot of the Japanese studios. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that. So Creme came out of the need for the first tube condenser microphone. I have another tube condenser that I'm working with. The new prototype that's going to be called Royalty. That's out this year. Royalty has been in my head for over a year. And once the Creme was out, I was like, okay, now I need something that covers the other side of the voice. The Creme is closer to an Elam 251. It's not a clone, but it's closer to it. So there's a lot less fullness on the low end. It's closer to how you would EQ a vocal. I need a tube condenser complement that has a very full low end and still has some brightness or some clarity on the top end. And that is a good complement between the two of them, the microphones. So I want the microphones to complement each other because a lot of my clients ended up buying more than one microphone in the brand. For people that are doing vocals, I want them to be able to buy the Royalty and feel like they've covered almost all their clients with those two microphones.
So what was the challenging part or any issue developing Royalty or?
Creme was a really smooth process and it went really well. No complaints. The Royalty, I've been putting a lot of extra time and care into the physical display and how it looks. That takes time.
So why did you want to use the real gold? Does that change sound or it's just the...
No, that's I wanted to create a product that, there's other gold microphones out there and,
okay.
and they're very expensive. This is going to be about half their cost. But what that does sonically is not so much important as what I've learned over time is that inspiring a performance for an artist is invaluable.
I see. Definitely. Like if my microphone uses a real gold,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm shining.
And it's not and it's not a lust for me wanting more money. It's like I see the way people react to certain tools.
And you know, because there's so many products and so
Yeah.
many microphones, sometimes it's a very good way to communicate with the artist as an engineer. Like, hey, I got the new microphone and oh my God, this one uses a real gold. And then it just create the vibe there to get into the recording.
Yeah. There's a very careful thought about what's being put in front of the artist. And we see it a lot in R&B and hip hop culture here. We're very fortunate to have so many creative people here in this country that have incredible artistic imagination. A lot of that comes out in their music, their fashion, their clothes, their appearance, their jewelry. And to have something that is a statement of them or an identity that they relate to immediately puts them immediately in a relaxed mind state. They feel at home. I came across that a number of years ago experimenting with some designs, and I found that people immediately that could just connect with the product it's like the Apple concept. Like when you can connect with a platform or a device, immediately the walls drop and you start using it in a different form, in a different way. And the same thing with the Royalty. It's an homage to Prince, the artist Prince, because of the colors and the design. I'm a huge Prince fan. But also it has a underlying commentary of what I think of this style of microphone and what I want a person to feel like when they're at the microphone. It's deeper than just gold on the microphone. It's a mission statement for how we need to look at ourselves when we're performing. I learned a long time ago that filling the gaps where people were not actively working or finding areas that were underfulfilled in the industry is a great place to start, because you start seeing things from a different vantage point. Everyone can go into a studio and walk in and be an assistant. Not everyone can do it well, but everyone can do that. There's a path for that. But not everyone can go spend half a day in a machine room and learn how the entire operation works for the entire studio. And if the power goes out in the building and you're that one engineer who knows how to power up the machine room, that's it. Or, you know, like you're the one engineer on staff who still knows how to do tape, operate a tape machine. And someone comes in with a huge project for a tape machine and you're the one person that knows how to do it. Knowing where things are missing is as important as knowing the things that are important. I've always strived to fulfill things that were missing before I focused on trying to copy someone else or do something else that was popular.
I think definitely this YouTube channel is the same thing for me.
I totally get that, yeah.
Yeah, like
yeah, when you told me initially early on about it, I was really intrigued, because at that time I think you were playing with like design concepts for acoustic panels.
Right.
And people are starting to now do that more often than not. But at the time it wasn't really done. Everyone was so absorbed with, no pun intended, absorbed with putting panels up and getting a color on the wall, or absorbing the sound. Now all of a sudden you can't buy a panel that doesn't have LED treatment built into it.
Exactly.
And
right?
raised off the wall properly.
Seriously, like I don't know why, but I think a lot of audio people have no interior design sense.
Yeah.
Just like your story of royalty. Like people are so focused on the technical parts, sound, or you know how it should absorb. They don't care about design sometimes.
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom in that. I even get lost in the sound sometimes, like it must be this, it must be that, and then you forget what it's actually doing or how someone's using it. I design a lot of studios, and the spaces that feel the best look the best.
Because that's the thing, people get inspiration.
Yeah.
Like just looking at royalty, you said it's designed by the Prince image, right?
Right.
Like people get inspiration from that look.
Sure, yeah. So they immediately connect with it. And having a space that also sounds good is even more important, right? And I'm seeing a lot of studios get built with all these LED designs and layered diffusion and stuff, and they don't all sound great, okay? But the people get a certain feeling when they're in those rooms. So what if you take it a step further, because it doesn't need to be either or. What if you take it a step further and say, okay, now we're going to make a room that looks amazing, it's super creative, and it's going to sound really good. I want to invite you to check out Mannheim Microphones online. We do an incredible amount of customization, original gear, as well as our products, so you can reach out to us with any requests. We also do modifications, vintage clones like U47, 67, and 87. So feel free to reach out to us with any requests, mannheimmics.com. Thanks so much for checking us out.
はい、ということでモンハイム社紹介してきました。てかいきなり食べてる。めっちゃうまいこの肉。機材の動画だけだとつまんないかもしれないんで、最後できるだけ外に出た時は食べログやってロサンゼルスのレストランを紹介していきたいと思います。まあでも今高いんでね、なんでももう外食したらこれ今日かなりお買い得なんで私ここ来たんですよ。普通のとこ行ったらもっとは本当はファンシーなとこ行こうと思ったんですけど、普通のとこ行ったらねもうね1人で5、6千円取られちゃうんでね、ランチで。
What's your YouTube channel?
I just started. Corn and Grill ね、Fresh Corn and Grill っていうお店なんですよ。めっちゃ美味しくてお買い得。お店の名前に Corn and Grill っていうぐらいなんで、このコーンがめっちゃうまい。ロサンゼルスにね2店舗しかないんですよ。皆さんもねやっぱそろそろコロナ終わって旅行もできると思うんで、ロサンゼルス来た時ぜひ行ってみてください。もう肉びっしりぎっしりくるし、だけどめっちゃ安いっていう。私今日こんだけ頼んでね2300円ぐらいだった。ということでモンハイム社説明してきました。いかがだったでしょうか。かなりマニアックな情報なんで皆さん気に入っていただけたかなと思いますっていうのは大手の会社ももちろんこれからインタビューはしていきたいと思ってるんですけど、なんか ありきたりって言っちゃあれなんですけど、ありきたりなものを意外に結構みんなもう情報持ってたりするんで、やっぱロサンゼルスから配信するっていう醍醐味はやっぱここですよね。やっぱ日本の皆さんが知らないものを伝えたいと私は思ってるので、今回はこの超ローカルなモンハイム社を、ちょっと題材に取り上げてみました。どこの大きな都市もそうだと思うんですけど、ロサンゼルスとかって超才能のある人がこう出てきていきなりパーンと超有名になっちゃうみたいな、おとぎ話みたいなイメージがあるかもしれないんですけど、やっぱりみんなアンドリューみたいに、小さいとこから始めてコツコツコツコツ毎日努力を重ねていって、やっぱ少しずつクライアントを増やしていって、大きな案件につなげてるっていう感じなんですよね。アメリカに限らずもう日本とか東京もそうだと思うんですけど、やっぱり日々の努力が大事なんだなっていうのをすごいインタビューして感じました。なんで私もちょっとコツコツコツコツ頑張ってこの YouTube チャンネル広げていけたらなと思ってます。で、モンハイム社の商品なんですけど、英語喋れない人は全然私を通じて注文してもらって構いません。なんかね、機材試すのも OK らしいんですよ。その場合は、送料は半分がモンハイム社持つから、いらない、この商品いらないって言って送り返してくる場合は、送り返す送料は皆さんに持ってもらうっていう感じなんですけど、そうやって試すのも全然 OK って言っていただいてるんで、英語を喋れる方は全然もうそのまま直接モンハイムの会社のウェブサイトを概要欄に貼っておくので、そこから全然アクセスしてもらって日本から注文していただいてもいいと思いますし、直接私の方にお問い合わせの E メールに連絡いただければ全然日本に配送していただく手続きをアンドリューにお願いしますので、ぜひ皆さんモンハイム社の機材試してみてください。ということでモンハイム社じっくり紹介してきました。次回はもっともっともっともっともっともっと面白い動画を配信していこうと思っているので、ぜひチャンネル登録もお願いします。それでは次回の動画までお楽しみに。